COPD has been around for a relatively long time. I'm sure I'm speaking to the
All right. Welcome. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome, John. It is indeed my soiree. Not sure how all the watch party stuff works sometimes, so I'm not sure if it actually says that I joined or how that works exactly, but I am indeed here. My name is Mike Hess. And I am the administrator of COPD Navigator on Facebook. I'm one of the administrators these days. The founder, I guess I could more appropriately call myself. I have run a group on Facebook for about 6 years, and about 3 of those years, as it turns out, camera is a little bit off center today just because getting ready to do our big Zoom conference later on tonight. But as I was saying, we've got 3 years, actually just over 3 years. I was looking back at YouTube, and we've got just about 3 years of footage out there these days. I don't know. I have to go back and look because it occurred to me that I didn't always do them concurrently live on the same day. So that I don't know that the date of upload on YouTube is the official anniversary date, but it has been about 3 years now. We've done various forms of live interactive edutainment here on COPD Navigator. And looking forward to continuing on with that. To that end, we're actually on a little bit early today because the COPD Foundation is doing a webinar at 4 o'clock. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about on House Call, as far as trying to, although we've been trying to lean more toward the whole idea of focusing on the ongoing maintenance stuff rather than strictly COVID-19 kind of stuff. But they're covering the COVID stuff. So they start at 4. So this is going to be somewhat abbreviated episode today. But, like I said, I want to make sure that we're hitting all our bases and making sure everybody's getting the information that they need. So to that end, please make sure that you're getting your questions either below or off to the side. Whichever way you have a question block, place for comments and all that kind of stuff. And we'll make sure that we get to them as soon as possible. On a similar note, after this show and after we talk to the COPD Foundation, tonight at 7 o'clock, and we'll get this information up on the Facebook page, we're doing what's called a Zoom conference where we actually can have a little bit more interaction. I helped my wife with another one last night. She does a lot of support groups for her obesity medicine program. They do a virtual support group there, and we're gonna start seeing. We started a couple weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, we had our first one. I had a few people show up. It was kind of nice, and hopefully, we'll see you at 7 o'clock tonight. I will, as a matter of fact, what I can do right now. Well, it might take a minute because who knows what I'm signed into these days. But we will get the login information into the various streams here and make it easy. Otherwise, you can find the information on our Facebook page, facebook.com/COPD Navigator, or you can always send me a message through COPD Navigator or on my personal page. So, or you can also send us an email. There we go. Why aren't you just coming up there? Help me out a little bit, Zoom. Zoom, honestly, is really easy to use. It's one of the reasons I like it and wanted to get why I've started to do kind of the setups through this. There are a couple of other options out there. Let's see. I looked at. Well, I had my first couple of conferences through the Microsoft Teams platform this week. That worked okay. Man, do I need a haircut. I haven't quite broken down and gotten the quarantine cut yet, the clippers or anything, but maybe getting close. Let's see. So here comes a link. Here's one in the watch party. Ta-da. And just to clarify, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Eastern Daylight Time. That's when we're going to be joining the festivities here. And in the comment feed. We'll go, let's see, at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Only one E in Eastern these days. Come join the ready room. And paste. So hopefully we'll be able to see a few more people this time around. Tonight we're going to be talking about medications. And why are we doing that? Well, as it happens, our very first live show, which hopefully can pull up here. Yep, here this should do. Oh, not playing TV. Just make the full screen there. Our very first live, this is a recording of it, obviously, but our very first live program did not actually cover medicine. I thought that it did, but then I looked back and I started watching a few minutes of each of these, and according to my commentary, the first one we did was actually about spirometry. And we got to see if we can make that bigger again, I guess. There we go. There we go. So this was it. This was COPD Navigator Live. It was a very original title, very creative. And we talked about spirometry. We talked about testing and you know why we do some of the tests. And I'm going to see, hopefully I can get the audio to play a little bit here.
So here we are once again, COPD Navigator Live. Back within the friendly confines of my office here at the medical school. Of course, we had a fantastic conference last week, but it is nice to be home where things usually go a little bit more right from a tech standpoint. Hopefully, we're going to iron out the bugs that we've had the last few sessions off and on and get things back to where they need to be. Right off the bat, I do want to take a moment and once again thank Jim and Mary Nelson for coming by and offering some fantastic education for our students and our clinicians out there on what it's like to go through a lot of these processes. We had another excellent presentation from one of our ethics professors here at the medical school, Dr. Tyler Gibb, who mentioned that a lot of times we get caught up in doing things to people instead of doing things for people. And Jim and Mary did a great job of putting a human face on why we do things for people and try to cut down on the amount of things we do to people. So I very much appreciate all of that. Looking forward to coming up next week. I'm going to be heading down to Tennessee and talking about our COPD Navigator group, some of the successes we've had so far, and I hope to be able to get some feedback on these live sessions. So one thing I would ask this week is if you send me a message or post in the group on one of these videos, talk about, first of all, if these live conferences are a benefit to you, secondly, how they're a benefit to you, and of course, for my own purposes, for quality control, what things we can do better. Other than some of the tech stuff, I get that's an issue sometimes, but please let me know how things could go better, and of course, if you have any topics for upcoming events. So with all that said, we're going to jump in today. Today's topic is, of course, spirometry, PFTs, lung function, all that good stuff. In my opinion, spirometry, first let's make some definitions here. Spirometry is one pulmonary function test. It's a relatively basic test. It's something that is part of the full suite of pulmonary function tests when your doctor orders that, but it's also something that's easy enough that can be done right in a primary care office. In my opinion,
this was going to originally be pretty cool, and now it's not. And now the great Throwback is a bummer. But this is a great time for you all to get your questions in there. We're going to try and reload this page here and see what we can do with it. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully, you know, I think part of the issue is it's such a nice day outside. The computer doesn't want to work either. But we should have all this stuff figured out by the time. I think part of the problem is just Chrome itself was kind of a bummer right there. Should have all this stuff ironed out by the time the ready room starts at 7. Hopefully the foundation does not have the glitches that we have right now either. One of the best things about... Hey. No, okay. Well, it was working for a second there. Maybe I'm just not getting... Maybe I'm just not getting the live update. But we're going to see what we can pull back up here. Trained professional here, folks. All right, so...
spirometry and PFTs in general are some of the most underutilized and also misunderstood tests that we have out there. A lot of times, just like everybody wants to get an answer from pulse oximetry or an answer from an ABG, everybody wants to look for an answer from your spirometry or your pulmonary function tests. And we're going to find out today how sometimes that's not necessarily the case. Spirometry and PFTs are incredibly useful. They're the most accurate standards out there for objective assessment of lung function and objective tracking of how things are going. But they do have limitations too, and it's important to recognize those limitations and look at the entire context of these lung function tests when trying to figure out how sick you are or something like that. So first off, let's talk a little bit about spirometry. Spirometry, for those of you who are language fans out there, actually means, I believe it's from the Greek, it's called breath measurement. Spiro, breath, metry is measurement, so we're actually measuring the amount of breath that goes in and out. A lot of times we focus on the breath that goes out because that's how we can determine.
This was pre-quarantine. Obviously, this was
in a particular finger.
2017. Seems like
so. It's been around for a relatively long time. I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here. We just don't know about a lot of this stuff, and the research is still in its relative infancy. So we have all this data, and we're trying to use this data to try to figure out how best to monitor, how best to track, how compared to their physiological normal. We can see on the curve on this curve over here.
Just rough right now, I guess.
Curve over here. This is a fairly distinctive carve out for
one of my biggest demonstrations. One of my favorite demonstrations. Actually, I have some better graphics about this these days, but the idea is, yes. I was thinking about sharing the video watching some of the video with it. What you're hearing, Karen, is the recording from 3 years ago. This is the very first COPD Navigator live. Obviously a recording of it, but this was the recording of it there. So the sound has been a little bit glitchy, so we're gonna just go ahead and turn that down a little bit. Because you guys will get the idea.
Disease, and according to
but this one of my favorite bits of this particular episode was emphasizing that technique is so important. You know, I talk a couple of times about confounding factors and things like that. We always talk about we got to have this good quality spirometry. We've got to have I've said it backwards. We always talk about we got to have spirometry, we got to have testing, we got to have this, we got to have that. We don't talk about the quality of the testing. We don't talk about the idea that when we do a test, it's got to make some sense. We've got to be able to trust the information that comes out of that test. Otherwise, what's the point? What good is it? It's not going to do us. It's not going to matter for us or anything if we don't have quality spirometry. And the reason I like that paper is because that is where I was actually able to fool the computer into thinking that it was a valid test, even though it wasn't. It was giving me diagnostic information that I had COPD, which I don't. We've got, as clinicians, we've got to do a better job of emphasizing that we need to do high quality testing, and we've got to do appropriate testing and things like that. And again, that's why we've got to have the right medications. That's why we're going to be talking about this stuff tonight in the Ready Room. We've got to make sure we have our proper testing equipment, like our in-check dials and our aerosol inhalation monitors and all that kind of stuff. We've got to make sure that we're making the right decisions based on the right data. So let's see. That was, like I said, the very first one. You can see we've come a bit of a distance. I like to think, at least. That's wrong screen there. We talk a lot about, well, and then we actually get into
which comes basically in two forms.
This one I think was actually the first one, because you can actually see now
Pulmicort, where all the doses of a particular month are preloaded into the container. All you do is twist it.
But if I pull up the window again, you can see in this one I was still using my boom mic here. And in some ways this was a little bit better, and in some ways it's not as good, because I'll tell you, I joke about it a lot because I've been doing this obviously for 3 years now, and I have a whole new respect for live television production, because obviously the stuff that people do for live TV, whether it's a news show or a sporting event or whatever it is far more complex. There's a lot more wheels moving. I suppose we can make the justification that there's a lot more people working on it too. But we've got a lot more wheels turning, and it's usually pretty flawless. I mean, when there are some issues here and there, but in my life, in my experience, audio is part of, that's like the audio is my gremlin. I struggle with the audio sometimes. I don't have a good explanation for why. It's quirky sometimes. But this was a good demonstration of, again, the more like things
that gives you
change, the more they stay the same. What am I doing?
The other kind of dry powder,
blowing on something.
These are the drugs like Atrovent or Spiriva. Spiriva being one of the long-acting forms of that.
I try to look at the camera a little bit
these
more
kind
these
of work similarly to the beta agonists, but on a different chemical path inside the body.
Telemedicine and things like that.
We sort of look at it as sort of a belt and suspenders approach, or perhaps where the beta agonists kind of pull the airways open from the outside, and the antimuscarinics kind of push it open from the inside.
You're looking at the screen.
I don't have a lot of strong data to back up this statement, but it seems as more and more research comes out, we're finding that the antimuscarinics, the Spiriva type drugs, seem to be a little bit more effective in the COPD population than our old standbys, the long-acting beta agonists. They're both very good drugs, of course. The new practice recommendations are starting to point more toward those antimuscarinics, though, those LAMAs, as preferred controller medication.
Sometimes it doesn't always show up.
The third class of drugs that we have, are the inhaled corticosteroids. And I'm sure many people have a love-hate relationship with these drugs. They do tend to have fewer of the big side effects as oral corticosteroids.
What am I talking
about? But from time to time, especially over the long term, we do see that some of that builds up in the body, and you start seeing some of those side effects. In addition, these new practice standards that have come out have shown that there's a higher risk of pneumonia in the COPD population who take these inhaled corticosteroids. And for that matter, for the first time, GOLD, the Global Initiative for Chronic Obstructive Lung Disease, is recommending a much more cautious approach with the inhaled corticosteroids. Drugs like Pulmicort and that sort of thing
really target those medications toward people who are having active benefit, active symptom relief, or a reduction in exacerbations after being on them. If you have a trial of them and they don't seem to really be affecting anybody's quality of life or their symptom burden or anything like that, it's probably okay to then step back from those drugs to keep that risk of pneumonia at a minimum. So that's kind of an overview of the main classes of inhaled medications that we have. And of course, some of these are available in nebulizer form as well. But today we're really going to focus on these inhalers. And so, of course, we have three main kinds of inhalers. We have the traditional metered dose inhaler with basically a medication vial that's filled with liquid that plugs into the boot, the administration device, gives us a nice little puff. All right. So that's fun. That's actually what we're going to be doing a little bit later tonight on the Ready Room. We're going to be going through a lot more of this stuff again, because it's really important, in my opinion, to have a solid foundation for a lot of this stuff. You know, we've got to. It's actually going to be probably easier if I can get a little monitor going here. I don't know how that's going to work, but the other thing that is tricky about this live TV sometimes is, I don't obviously have a background in TV production, so I'm kind of teaching myself a lot of this stuff as we go along, and it doesn't always work so well. But I think if I do this, then I can actually monitor it at the same time that it's playing, and we don't have any dead space. And you inhale it that way. So I can actually talk to myself. And that might be a fun throwback for next week, is trying to critique myself as we're going through some of these videos. So also saying hello real quick to Jeannie. Jeannie Nelson checking in. Hopefully you're going to check out our... Jeannie was one of the people on our first Ready Room 2 weeks ago. So hopefully we'll see you back this week. So yeah, let's, what else we got? What else did we talk about here? So all of these videos, this whole thing started in, like I said, 2017. And we covered a lot of different topics. Nutrition, that's always a good one. That's one, we did a couple weeks ago with my wife. Who, as I mentioned, does a lot with obesity and nutrition and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious as to what I had to say with some of these things. So let's see here.
Maybe you're not as concerned about stretching out your stomach tissue itself, but if you have a big patch of air in your belly, it's going to make it a lot harder for your diaphragm, that muscle that sits right at the bottom of your rib cage, to expand and take a deep breath.
So again, going back to the whole idea that audio has always been problematic, it's still good information. I mean, we first of all, we hardly ever talk, in my experience, we hardly ever talk enough about trying to, or what, about nutrition. We, for a variety of reasons, we can call it, the big pharma stuff, and it's problematic for a couple of reasons, but it's difficult to talk about good nutrition because it's one of those things where it's highly personalized and highly individualized, and there aren't even good answers some of the times, but we don't have time for it. We want to, as clinicians, we want to put ourselves into that position where we can give that good quality information, but we don't have time for it. The PCPs and stuff at any rate. So that's a good one. All of these again are freely available on YouTube. There is a playlist. These are all the ones from 2019. Kind of getting a kick out of this whole idea. Here's one called A New Normal. which I think was kind of going back to the whole idea of, trying to figure out what one's baseline is, and then that's how we teach how to recognize flares and things like that. We had some COPD awareness stuff, some respiratory therapy stuff. We had went for a couple of times here, and we had some end of life care, like that one. Do not do in COPD. That was one of my favorites. That was I think we were talking about like myths and things like that. Getting super fancy with the fonts and everything there too. All right, apologize for the delays here, everybody. It looks like we're getting everything squared to go, so I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Mike Hess. This is COPD Navigator Live, a weekly look inside the world of COPD with some of the new latest news topics coming out. Plus, if you're new to the show, we have about a half hour's worth of... I've been saying the same stuff for 3 years. Might be overused or might benefit from a review process. They scored those based on whether there was consensus about yay or nay on a particular domain. Narrowed that down to 95 in the first round. Then starting to get fancy with the graphics here. Continue to you or who we can. So well here. I chuckle because when we're talking about the meds, I heard me talking about inhaled corticosteroids, and I see here. In 2018-ish, do not administer inhaled corticosteroids routinely for people with FEV1 greater than 60% predicted and fewer than 2 exacerbations, except for asthma COPD overlap syndrome. So here we are in May 2020, 2 years later, and we're still not really all that much closer to figuring out whether this is good information, bad information, wrong information. It depends on who you ask and what day of the week it is and what phase of the moon is ascending. And I mean, it's comical sometimes. Truly, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We've got some other greatest hits here of things like, this is my whole career right here. I do not assume people are correctly using inhalers without confirmation. Now, if I remember this study correctly, this came out of Italy, I believe, Italy or Spain. And holy goodness. I mean, this is... Good night, folks. I mean, this is my career summed up in 2 lines right now. Essentially, this is my biggest area of focus. This is my biggest pet peeve with other clinicians. This is what I keep trying. I do have some connections with pharma, and I keep trying to tell them, look, we have got to focus on technique. We've got to be teaching our clinicians and our payers, and we've got to be doing all of these things so that people know how to use their thing. And if they're not, we put them on a different thing. Obviously, I haven't gotten too far in 2 years, unfortunately. So, Gold is kind of going this way. We're not doing serial pulmonary function testing or spirometry. So, it's interesting to see, some of this stuff has evolved over the last couple of years. Spain, expert panel in Spain, 16 things that were overdone or overlooked. Yeah, and I agree with all that. So, of course, then, things, life happens as I say a lot. Took a little bit of a break for a while with the Navigator Live because, this was a pretty time consuming way to do it. Because what I had to do was I would record the live at the same time, as the live feed, and then I would have to edit it into, in a video editing software, and then get it uploaded to YouTube. And with 3 kids and full-time job, and let's see, in 2018, I was just about to starting grad school. I was working on some other projects, very time-consuming. So ended up taking a break for that for a while. And then in 2018, I believe it was, yeah, in the fall of 2018, I had some people say, "Hey, why aren't you doing that thing anymore? Why aren't you doing your live shows anymore?" I had RTs coming up to me and asking me about that. So then that's 2020. So then I wanted to start it up again, and so I put a little bit more effort into it. I wanted to do it at home, or I had a little bit more control over sound and vision, or the vision controls and stuff like that. So I started doing a little bit of other stuff and came up actually a good friend Elena, who hopefully is still here, with the idea of me interviewing me from the past. Have this idea of BTV, breathing television. Okay. And this one was actually filmed from the living room. Still have that couch. The curtains are different though. Filmed from the comfort of my living room. I think this was still before we had we have some of the on-screen graphics here. We still had the beginning of Upelry. This was February 4th, 2019, so that had just come on the market. What else was in the news that particular day? This was I think this was when I first came up with that logo too, or not long after that, because we used to have, as you notice, we had that inhaler logo, and somebody pointed out to me, I think it was Pam Plosh maybe, pointed out that COPD treatment is not just medications, and that's one of those things that you talk about all the time. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I should probably practice what I preach and not focus on meds. Even though they are very important, I like to teach about meds. That shouldn't necessarily be the focal point of COPD therapy. So this was, again, kind of a starter thing. I do like to do this from time to time. I know, especially in the age of YouTube, it can get a little repetitive for folks. I mean, they can just say, well, go watch that other video. But I do think it is good to, we've had some growth over the last couple of years, and people haven't seen the material or don't like to use YouTube or what have you. I think it can be good to go back and review a lot of these things as kind of a refresher, and probably something I need to do again one of these days when I start doing some of the more regularly scheduled things. And then let's see, I'm trying to remember why we got a whole 4 episodes in 2019. And then took a break. 2019. What happened in 2019? I think we were doing it for quite a while in 2019, so I'm not sure. Are they just not categorized? I may have that much of a backlog to upload, honestly. Because again, that was just difficult to get all that done. And then that takes us to 2020, and so I have a couple. Yeah, so I started doing this again in January, and this is where we started setting up the studio a little differently, and had some fun with this stuff. And then as we were going through our bi-weekly show, we're doing it every other week at this point. Streamed live. This is where we started being able to stream it through YouTube. That made things a heck of a lot easier, and that's why everything is kind of current these days. And yeah, so that is the history of COPD Navigator Live. Over the last 3 years, we've come in doing some fun stuff. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. And quiet crowd today. No, it's not the usual time, and maybe everybody's bored out of their minds with reminiscence, but it's kind of fun to check things out here. Always good to see where you've been to figure out where you're going, in my opinion. So now the floor is back to being yours. What's on your mind out there? We got a few people still hanging in there. We've got about 10 minutes before I'm going to cut stuff loose to go to the COPD Foundation's webinar. If you need some contact information about that, then make sure that you are, well, let's see if I can find, should be able to pull that up real quick here. Man, anybody's allergies acting up today? I mean, I guess it doesn't, I guess it's kind of a silly question for me to ask a nationwide audience because everybody's allergies are going to be a little bit different. But I'm going to get some hand sanitizer here. Since I was just touching my face. All right. So COPD Foundation. Ooh, sorry about that. That's the wrong keyboard again. The other nice thing about Zoom is it's a lot easier to use sometimes than even trying to live stream on Facebook here. So if you are a member of our COPD Navigator discussion group, you should have this link already. But we'll also get this dropped into our various comment feeds here. Takes just a second to load up their page. Here's the next COVID webinar. Boy, that's a big old link. Yeah. So you can actually go log in now. I'll just drop the whole thing and hopefully it stays clickable. We'll drop that here. Elena mentioning allergies are high in Michigan right now. I would tend to agree. I have had some patient interaction that is also confirming that, and I know mine have just been kind of all over the place the last couple of days. It kind of, it's one of those things where you kind of freak yourself out because it's like, oh, I'm coughing. Is it COVID? But it is just allergies. So yeah, this is coming up at 4 here, and then again, hopefully you come back again at 7 o'clock. Earlier we posted a link to the Ready Room conversation that we're going to have tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Hello to Valerie checking in. Appreciate you stopping by. This was an early show today. We're going to be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock for another Fitness Friday. We're going to have some fun. We've had 2 requests. Well, we had 1 request and 1 other thing here. So we're going to do some balance exercises and things like that. And then we might also see if we can find some wacky things to do too. So Jeannie says, haven't been able to play with my granddaughter in 7 weeks. Now that it's getting warmer, I have a sand table and a water table on my porch. If I wear a mask and keep my hands away from my face, do you think I can play with her safely on the porch? A lot of variables there. Remember that your mask is not to protect you. Your mask is to protect other people if you happen to be an asymptomatic carrier. So the first thing I would say, I don't know how old she is. I'm assuming fairly young, with sand table and water table, all that stuff. In a perfect world, she would be the one wearing the mask. And then you would also want to make sure that you are, I would probably give it a good 10 feet away, 10 to 12 feet away. There are also some other factors here. I'm trying to remember exactly where you're calling in from. I know here in Michigan, the governor just today announced that the small gatherings of 10 people or fewer are allowed again. And see, this is kind of the issue that we face a lot in the U.S. Even in smaller geographic areas, like, everybody always wants to look at Sweden and extrapolate their whole experience, or, look at other countries. We have in the U.S., we have probably a half dozen to a dozen different outbreaks. We look at it as a national problem because they're all basically the same thing. But if you look at some of the, if you look at demographics and geography, we have these regional hotspots and things like that. So it's a little bit difficult to put a blanket one-size-fits-all answer on whether it's safe or not. 3.5, like I said, if she'd wear a mask, that's still going to be the ideal thing. Wouldn't even necessarily have to be one of the big old surgical masks. They make kid-sized masks these days. Or if you happen to have a seamstress handy, somebody who knows that kind of stuff, there are patterns online. If she can wear a mask and stay 10 to 12 feet away, I think that's probably your best bet. Especially if you're in a place where maybe things are starting to plateau or tail off a little bit. If you're still in a real hot spot, in New York or something like that, or over on the east side of our state here in Michigan, it's still pretty heavy, cooling down, and it's starting to get a little bit heavier on this side of the state now. But that would probably be, I don't know that I would wholeheartedly endorse it, but I think that it's always a trick trying to wrestle with what is clinically best, what is psychologically best, what is interpersonally best. So I go back and forth. My gut says it would be healthier. The safest thing to do is to say no. But the most practical thing for your mental well-being and all that sort of thing, if you're using the proper precautions, it should be an acceptable risk. Pocono Mountains, where you going yellow tomorrow. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the yellow meant. Yellow phase, because again, it's one of those things where every state is kind of doing it a little bit differently. I think we have like 6 phases. Yellow phase, right here's Pennsylvania. Yellow phase. Yellow phase means most but not all businesses to reopen, puts limitations on social gatherings. So yeah, it looks like you're basically where we're at in Michigan. So I feel a little bit better about it now, saying that it's probably safer. Again, making sure that you are using the social distancing, or the physical distancing. And I guess that's the thing. Be social, but from a distance. Give yourself a little bit of extra room. I know that's going to be tough too, but they say 6 feet. I would recommend more along the lines of 10 to 12 feet, just because kids can be messy. They're sneezers and they don't always cover their cough or their sneeze or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you're well away. But being that you're outside, if you follow, go ahead and wear a mask also. But see if you can get her to wear a mask. That would be better. It's still red all around me, Carbon County. So it's still red, but you're going yellow tomorrow. Okay. So, like I said, I mean, that's, let's see. Again, it kind of comes down to, so you're just south of Wilkes-Barre. Well, Carbon County is just south of Wilkes-Barre. And so it looks like, on the little map I found, where is it? Oh, Carbon County. Okay, so that's where to go. Oh, okay. So you are in Carbon County, where it is yellow. 33 cases in the last 14 days, according to, looks like Philadelphia Inquirer. And then, yeah, red all around you. Wow, that's interesting. But yeah, like I said, again, once this whole thing is, once Well, you know, it's funny you should mention that, John, because our AARC conference, that was the other throwback I wore today. I can't really see it so well with the camera angle today, but ouch. This was our parade shirt when we did our parade in New Orleans. And our conference this year is supposed to be in Orlando. So we are really hoping that we can go to Disneyland. But yeah, you know, like I said, going back to Jeannie's thing for a minute here, um, the other factor I would want to know is if your granddaughter's daughter, or if your granddaughter's parents, if either one of them has had any exposures or potential exposures, because that would be a deal breaker, even with a mask and all that stuff. If they have been safe, if they've been quarantined, if they have no known exposures or no suspected exposures, and you do the distancing and you stay outside and all that stuff, I think that's about as safe as you can make it. And I think that would be, for me, that would be an acceptable risk. Whether that is for you, because it's certainly not it's a non-zero risk. That's kind of a decision that you have to make. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say, you shouldn't do that. I mean, there are a lot of things that we shouldn't do that we all do anyway. And there are a lot of people who are doing stuff that shouldn't do it. My big concern for a lot of the relaxing stuff isn't so much that it's clinically problematic. It's the fact that, we're starting to relax a little bit, even though all of our people are still saying, be careful, wear a mask, all that stuff. All of a sudden, everybody took their masks off. I went out to the store earlier today for the first time in a week or so, and probably half the number of people were wearing masks that were. And I have great concerns about Memorial Day weekend. Well, I should say I have great concerns about the 2 weeks after Memorial Day weekend. Because I think a lot of people are they're tired, they're frustrated, they're pent up, and now they're looking at some of these relaxation of restrictions as it's over, it's time to move on, and we're not there yet. I mean, we're still seeing increasing cases. In Michigan, we had 500 cases reported yesterday. It's been pretty steady. We've had 500 to 600 new cases a day for the last week. It's not as bad as it was, but that's, again, assuming, calculating that we're doing all of these things and we're still have pretty steady increasing. So my biggest concern is more in the psychosocial aspects of it and people letting their guard down and all that kind of stuff. But if you and your family can take precautions, then yes, by all means, bring the daughter out there, have her play in the sand table. Just be careful. However, we probably can get some better information on good authority from the COPD Foundation starting in about 4 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up right now. However, I do highly, highly encourage everybody to come back again at 7 o'clock. I'm going to repost the comments here. We're going to copy and paste there. If you are available after dinner or what have you, we're going to talk about meds. We're going to talk about some stuff coming through the pipeline. We're going to talk about, just go over kind of a refresher of what's available, what's out there, all that kind of stuff. And of course, we'll go ahead and answer whatever's on your mind. If you want to show me your inhalers, if you want to show me your technique, if you haven't done one or anything like that, let's do that. This is still a fairly new thing, so it's still kind of loose, still playing around with the format a little bit, but it is what it is. And then tomorrow, 4 o'clock, join us back here at our usual time, same bat time. Well, not same bat time, our usual bat time and the same bat station, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, what have you. And we're going to move around a little bit. We're going to get moving again. It's supposed to be another beautiful day here. We're going to do some stretches and then maybe go outside for a bit. Not online until I figure out how to make all this stuff work through my phone. But we're going to have some fun. So until then, my name is Mike Hess. I hope to see you in a few minutes on the COPD webinar. I hope to see you at 7 o'clock on COPD Navigator Ready Room. And I really hope to see you again tomorrow for another edition of House Call Fitness Friday. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep breathing lightly. We'll see you hopefully sometime, maybe multiple times in the next 24 hours, folks. So take care.